Hello, everyone, and welcome to Full-on, your Fulham-centric football podcast. I'm your host, Ash Woolford. Joining me today for our Crystal Palace preview are my fellow Fulham podcasters, MOZZA and AJ. How are we doing, guys?
Very good.
Yeah, very good, very good.
And obviously, we're delighted to have with us Crystal Palace fan. I'm going to say social media royalty a bit. You know, you're one of the top Palace fans to have on. So we're happy to have you on, Dan. It's Mr. HLTCO himself. Dan, how are you doing? Thanks for joining us.
I'm very good, thanks, lads. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Obviously, we're here to discuss this Saturday's game between Fulham and Palace at Selhurst Park. You know, it's a game that, for me, is always quite important. Being a Fulham fan who lives, within stone's throw of Selhurst, it's always been, a big game for me. So I'm excited for it. We'll start as we always do when we have a guest on with you, Dan, and we'll just ask, from a Palace fan's point of view, how do you feel that your season's gone so far? That now that we're 10 games in,
I think it's the narrative which Palace fans aren't really in control of when it comes to the back end of last season with Oliver Glasner and how well we did and the start to this one. I saw plenty of people saying that it was a purple patch of form, that we were going to regress to the norm, and then the first 8 to 10 games of this season, you've had plenty of neutrals saying, you're back to where you're expected to be. I think the reality is probably somewhere in the middle. If you look at the overall performances we've been putting in, we've lost 3 of our last 11. Those 3 defeats were by a single goal. We should have come away with 3 points on Saturday evening against Wolves. Obviously beat Spurs prior to that, beat Villa in the Cup. So I think, you sort of, well, at least from my perspective, I'm reluctant to say we've turned a corner, but certainly there feels like there is more energy in the team now. And even though we're going to be without Adam Walton and Abir Eze against your boys on Saturday, I think there's confidence in the group again, which, it doesn't necessarily take you all the way to 3 points, but it's certainly a better place to be than we were, say, 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, from an outsider's point of view, I think Palace have been a bit hard done by these first 10 games of the season because, when you think of a club of Palace's size, and Fulham are a exact same size club, so we know how it is, but we haven't had the same summer you've had, where you've had 2 England boys at the Euros, you've had 2 boys over playing in the Copa America, and then obviously you had obviously one's now left, but you had 1 player playing at the Olympics, and that's obviously going to put a massive dent into your availability at the start of the season anyway. It's great for confidence for those players because they're getting those call ups, but it probably has hindered the start of your season. Do you agree with that, or is that just?
No, I would definitely say I agree. Yeah, I think as you've got to bear in mind as well from a momentum perspective. John-Philippe Mateta got to the final of the Olympics, they lost. The Colombians got into the latter stages, they didn't win it. Obviously, England got to the final, we didn't get past Spain. And on top of that, you look at Ismail Assar, we signed him from Marseille. I don't think he had a pre-season with them. Trevor Chalobah was frozen out at Chelsea by Enzo Maresca. There was that whole scenario where he's trying to get away and he finally did it at the back end of the window. Eddie Nketiah was not central to Arsenal's plans in pre-season. So Oliver Glasner, on one hand, you could suggest it's, moving the deck chairs around on the Titanic and trying to make excuses. But he said we haven't really had a full pre-season as a group. And, in a strange way, we've been doing it on the fly. And, I think those excuses do tend to fall on deaf ears when the results aren't coming. But when you can put together a run of 3 games like the most recent 3 that we've had, it certainly holds more water for me. And to be honest, coming into this game against Fulham, I think I saw, in terms of expected points, you should be 3rd in the table going into this. So it's not going to be easy. I think it's a very simplistic view to think, Fulham at home, we can circle that as a potential win. But in actual fact, it's probably going to be a very hard-fought game throughout, I would imagine.
Yeah, Jack, AJ, sorry. When we look at this game, obviously, we always ask about potential lineups and what we're going to see from Fulham coming up on the weekend. I'm not expecting much of a change from the team that played on Monday night, just naturally because of the sort of overhang from the result that we got on Monday and how that felt. We look at Palace and we look at the squad that they have available to them. We know that the 2 players that we would all be earmarking as the ones to watch are both out injured. So that's a massive positive for us. What are you expecting from us squad wise, in terms of, trying to match up the Palace and how they play at home because they tend to play quite expansive football at home?
Yeah, it's a tough one. A few of the substitutes, obviously, in Monday's game, we're going to give Marco Silva some questions to ask. Kearney performed very well when he came on, especially since we had a lot more of the ball, which we could potentially see doing with Palace as well. It's kind of difficult to judge on Glasner's football sometimes, whether or not he wants to give the ball away or have it. So I will let Dan give us more insights onto that later. But yeah, it's a tough one. We're going to have some questions asked in terms of the squad and how we rotate, going from Monday to Saturday as well, and the fact that regardless of the fact that we won, it was quite an emotionally draining game. We might see some rotation from a few players there as well. I think we're going to set up very much the same in terms of our key assets. Anderson, obviously, starting against Palace. It's going to be vital. The midfield will probably remain very much unchanged, but we might see some changes to those wings. Adama might come back in, create some very fast and dynamic pressure. And we might see Nunez start as well. Even though Jimenez is in good form, it's one of those, his age, so many back-to-back games, so quick on the turnaround from Monday to Saturday. Who knows?
Yeah, Mozza, we look at Palace and the prospect of playing Palace away. Selhurst Park's always a really difficult place to go to. It's a great atmosphere for football to be played in, and they do make it quite intimidating an intimidating place for an away team to go to at times. What are your expectations in terms of not just the game, but the prospect of playing at Selhurst Park?
I think it'd be a very tough game going to Selhurst. It can never be sort of undersold or taken for granted. It's one of the very few away stadiums I've been to. In fact, probably the top one that I almost don't want to say has like the most electric atmosphere, really. And I view a team like Palace, after coming off the back of just playing Brentford, I always see Palace as a challenge for us. To me, that's more of a, we can call it derby, but it being another London club, I always fear that more than going to the likes of somewhere like Brentford or entertaining them at Craven Cottage. I think it will be a hard-fought game, as Dan has said. I don't really know what to expect at the moment. I think our lineup will be pretty much the same, like AJ just said. Might see Adama start. The only change I would want to make, I don't think it's going to happen, would be to put Harrison Reed in place of Pereira. But I can keep on dreaming. So, yeah, I'm not too sure what to make of it yet, but it will be a challenge, I think, for both sides. And I think Palace are going to come out guns blazing, and they'll be up for it because they've got everything to fight for so far.
Dan, what should we expect from this Palace team on Saturday? Because I'm expecting a really hard fought game, because it always is whenever we go to Selhurst Park. What are you expecting from Palace yourself?
Well, I think, if you look at the formation that Oliver Glasner tries to use whenever he can, the three centre-backs has become a key part of it. It's something he changed immediately when he first arrived. Now that, obviously, Joachim Andersen signed for yourselves, we have Maxence Lacroix, we have Trevor Chalobah, and we have Mark Gay. They've been using those three to great effect in recent weeks, and I would expect that to continue with Dean Henderson in goal. You'll have Daniel Munoz on the right-hand side of that back five and Tyreek Mitchell on the left. Obviously, with Adam Wharton out, he, unfortunately for us, was such a key player at the back end of last season, has been carrying his groin issue, which has been a major problem. Will Hughes picked up his 5th booking of the season as well against Wolves on Saturday. So it looks as though we're going to be in a scenario with Daichi Kamada once again deputising in the middle of the park. And that in itself is not ideal because, we haven't seen the best of Daichi so far. He signed for us on a free. He's known to Oliver Glasner. But I think if you look at his best performances to English audiences, they've come in a more archetypal 10 position. And we don't really play with the availability of a 10. So it's looking highly likely at the moment that he will continue to start. And that is something that will frustrate Palace fans, I think. We saw Chet Doucouré come back off the bench against Wolves, thankfully. He's had a toe tendon injury that he picked up against Leicester, and he appears to be back to full fitness now. So I would expect him to start next to Daishi Kamada in the middle. And then obviously with Abir Eze missing, you've had Ismail Assar, Eddie Nketiah, and John Philippe Mateta as the front three, with JP as the archetypal 9. That has sort of led to a scenario where you've been crowbarring Eddie Nketiah in on one of the flanks. It hasn't been ideal because obviously he would like to play in the 9 position, but I think the physicality that Mateta offers is something that Oliver Glasner is reluctant to pass up, and I would expect that's how we're going to set up tactically. In terms of the effort, we want to be able to press from the front. I think if you go back to our game against Nottingham Forest, which we lost 1-0, they've done very well in the early part of this season, but they sort of let us have the ball and come at them. Whereas if you compare and contrast that to Spurs, the game we won 1-0, Spurs are trying to play out from the back. They're trying to be a bit more expansive, and our higher press was able to catch them. That's how we scored the goal that got us the all-important win. So in a strange way, Fulham would actually be better going into it in an archetypal away team performance rather than trying to, play football against us, because that's ultimately what Oliver Glasner wants from his opposition, so that we can press high and pick holes.
AJ, listening to that, how much does that worry you? Because we know how much Marco doesn't really care about home or away. He knows that we know the type of football we want to play, and we tend to try to be quite attacking and go at teams. Does that worry you that that's what Palace want?
Yes and no. It worries me in the sense of as a football fan and knowing our philosophy on football, if we can dominate the possession of the ball, we have a tendency to do that under Marco Silva, which normally leaves us mistake prone. But at the same time, I've seen Marco go gun for gun in terms of the press. Man City is a great example of that, and use very fast, very quick, very attacking options to match those sort of styles of play in the past. So it could be an interesting one if we set up in any way like we did against City, which is probably a huge compliment to Palace as well in terms of their press. But if we set up in any way we did against City, we could be in for a goal fest here. But from both teams, that is, not just from Fulham.
Yeah, we've seen our defending at times this season. It's not always the best. Mozza, before we look at players to watch and give scoreline predictions and stuff, we saw on Monday night there was a great. We saw what we hoped we would see in the terms of us not giving up, playing until the last minute, which is something that we've had a problem with this year because we conceded a lot of late goals. And I know on Monday it's a bit different because we were chasing the game rather than going in with a lead. When you look at the game on Saturday, we know we're going to have to be on it because we know what Palace are like and how they play. What do you want to see from the guys in terms of commitment? What do you want to see in terms of the way we attack the game? Because I want to know if you think that we need to. We had a real chat on Tuesday night when we reviewed the Brentford game about having more shots and trying to be getting more men in the box. What do you want to see from that?
I want to see less reliance on not necessarily set pieces, but just trying to rely on crosses going into the box. If we're lucky enough to run up the wings, I would just want to see a bit more of attack on the inside and a bit more runs in. I'm not saying I want to walk it in the goal or anything. Yes, the game that we had on Monday, there were a few pop shots, but they were few and far between for me. But I'd just like to see a bit more, someone getting their foot behind the ball and having a go, because I just don't feel like there was enough end product, to use that phrase again, like I did the other day. Just want to see someone having a bit more of a go, because there just seems to be an awful lot of reluctance, whether it be Jimenez or if we've got Muniz on, whoever starts, they're going to get frustrated. They need the service. I worry about the formation, as I adhered to earlier. I think, what did we play the other night? Was it 4-2-3-1? And I know we always just play the one up front anyway, but I think whoever is striking for us, they just need more support. So, yeah, I just want to see a little bit more technicality in terms of getting the ball to the striker at the end and getting shots on goal and in the goal.
Yeah, I think you're spot on in terms of that. I think Monday night showed our real weakness is when we get to the edge of the opposition's box and just having the ability to make anything of opportunities. And it does worry me that teams seem to be able to just splice us apart quite easily with a one pass here and there, that what takes us 30 passes the team can do in 2. And it does worry me sometimes that we have that, and it will worry me on Saturday playing against Palace, because I've seen in a few of the games this year that watching them that they're not scared to go a bit more direct if they need to. And that tends to be the sort of attack that really does kill us. And I'm hoping that we don't see too much of it on Saturday. Before we discuss like what's going on, what the hopes are for the rest of the season and stuff, Dan, we like to do a thing on the show before we give a match prediction, where we give one player to watch from each team from our own point of view, and then a score prediction. So can I get a Palace player for us to watch out for, a Fulham player that you're wary of, and then a match prediction for Saturday?
Well, I think it's difficult with Palace because obviously we've lost Michael Elise. He would have been the obvious candidate. Abiri Eze is not available. Adam Wharton's not available. If you look at the 11, we aren't really blessed at this point in time with much in the way of creative talent. Ismail Assar could have had a hat-trick on Saturday evening. He fluffed his lines and left the pitch very frustrated. We're still waiting for Eddie Nketiah to score his first Premier League goal, not for the lack of trying. I think he's had the most shots on target of any Premier League player without finding the back of the net this season. But if you look at the way that we've performed, and particularly on Saturday, we managed to score 2 goals from set pieces, and there's been a long running sort of joke / gallows humour thing with Palace fans that we don't score from corners. We managed to do that through Mark Gay. And I honestly feel as though the back 3 is so key to what Oliver Glasner has tried to build. I think you can focus on Jean-Philippe Mateta's goals and the creative talents of Abiri Eze and Michael last season. But if you look at the way that we set up at the back end of the previous campaign, there was always, in attacks, one of the back 3 that would join the midfield and create something of an overload. And even though it didn't work out to that exact blueprint on Saturday, there was one moment where Mark Gay overlapped Eddie Nketiah, tried to join the attack. And that in itself, even though it ended up being something that didn't bear fruit, is, I think, a tactical ideology that Oliver Glasner will look to really hammer home throughout the rest of this season. So it's a bit of a wishy-washy answer, but because it rotates across the back 3, it's more one of that trio pushing into the midfield and creating the necessary overloads for us to be able to try and suffocate you. From a Fulham point of view, and I'm not trying to blow smoke up your asses here at all, there are just a number of players that worry me on an individual basis. I look at Traore as a prime example, someone that can blow hot and cold. Up against our fullbacks, again, if you look at the way that we've tried to set up, they provide the width for us where you don't naturally have that in the midfield. And if we do get caught out in transitions, I feel like his pace and power could be, a huge problem for us if, we do get caught a bit high up the field.
Yeah, I completely understand what you mean in terms of him, but I think every Fulham fan who's just heard you say that will tell you that Eddie Nketiah hasn't scored and has had the most shots on target from any player who hasn't scored this season. Yeah. Fulham are coming to town on Saturday, so he's
Spurs fans said this to me, on the score. Spurs fans were saying they were going, he's an ex-Arsenal, and admittedly they did give us our first win of the season, but he didn't find the back of the net. So we'll wait and see.
AJ, how about yourself, mate? Let's give us a Palace player to watch out for and a Fulham player you're expecting to perform in this game.
Palace player to watch out for. Decore is always dangerous. Is probably going to be vital for them in the midfield. I think that's probably my best shout. Fulham player of this. This feels like it could be one of those Andreas Pereira style games where he either blows very, very hot or blows very, very cold. He'll either have an absolute stinker or have one of his best performances of the season. So I think watch out for him for either side of the coin, and we'll either be apologising profusely to him for previous words on the podcast in our review of the game, or we'll be screaming and shouting even more. I think he's the one to watch out for. Score prediction. Do you know what? I don't see us with back-to-back London derby wins. I'm going to say 1-1. I call it a derby because I think I'm more concerned and more interested in Palace than I ever have been about Brentford. So
Okay, Mozza, what about yourself, mate? Give us a Palace player to watch out for and a Fulham player you're expecting to perform in this game.
Well, I laugh what we were just saying about Nketiah, where he hasn't had a goal yet. And like you said, Ash, we're coming to town, so it just seems odds on. I don't want to keep talking about Brentford, by the way, but I had this feeling when they brought on Carvalho later in the game the other night, and I thought, oh, this will be him scoring against us. So it's just a very Fulham thing to happen where Nketiah will get a goal. So, I think my score prediction, I'm sensing a draw as well, maybe 1-1 or 2-2. Hate to be negative. I don't see us coming away with a win. And what was the other thing? Oh, our player to watch out for. I want to see Reece Nelson start again. I really do want to see him start the game. I think he deserves another chance at doing that. Don't want to see him brought on as a sub. So, that would be my guy to watch for us.
Okay. For me personally, I think there's only really one Palace player that scares me, and that's Mateta, because he's a striker that I love watching him play football. He just has this ability to score that, we haven't had a striker that's had that ability since Mitro. He doesn't need to have 30 shots in a game to score, which is a problem we often have. But he is a lovely striker, and he's one of those strikers that if he was in a Fulham shirt, we'd all love him at Fulham, because he's outstanding. And as I say, I live in Croydon. I know an awful lot of Palace fans, and they all love him, and there's a reason for it, and it's because of that. Fulham wise, I bigged up Anthony Robertson to need to have a big game against Brentford on Monday, and he did. So I'm hoping I'm going to keep that string running with this game. For Fulham, I reckon it's going to be one of those games that Alex Iwobi really shines in. We saw he played really well on Monday, even though everyone did. He's having an outstanding season so far. Jack did share it in our WhatsApp group earlier on. I did see on Twitter that he's had the most successful passes into the box from any player in Europe, joint with Yamal from Barcelona, which is an outstanding feat when you think that that's Fulham attacking in the Premier League, and hopefully he can keep that up. I just imagine it's going to be one of those games where he goes special. Now, in terms of a match prediction for me and Dan, with much respect, I've got an awful lot of love for Palace, but I can't live with Palace beating Fulham. Too many Palace fans around me, including wife's family.
Gloating, are we?
You'd be surprised. No, you're not that bad. It's just that a few of my neighbours are Palace fans, and the school run is a nightmare if Fulham lose. So I need Fulham to win on Saturday. I do, however, think it'll be a close game, and I do think it's another game where there could potentially be a few goals, especially because our weakness defending tends to be the way that Palace like to attack. So I'm going to go for 3-2 for Fulham, but I will take a 1-0 sloppy own goal win. I don't care. I just don't want to lose. So we'll go with that. Dan, thank you very much for joining us, mate. Do really appreciate you giving us your time and coming over onto the pod. Looking out for Palace this season. With much joke about wanting to win on Saturday, I do actually really like it when Palace have a successful season, because, as I say, I do know an awful lot of Palace fans, and they're a great club and they do an awful lot of good community work. What are your hopes for the rest of the season, sort of before we finish?
I think, we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. There were plenty of people giving us stick at the back end of last season for getting too big for our boots. But I think we were just enjoying being good for a period of time. We were winning games and it felt free and easy, and we were putting 4 past United and 5 past Villa. And it was just, out of the ordinary, really. So the hope is that we can stabilise, that we don't have any, reason for managerial speculation, that we can get our ducks in a row and get ourselves some clear blue water from the relegation zone. I'm pretty happy with the way that we play football, because ultimately, you can go down the Roy Hodgson route, the Tony Pulis's, the Sam Allardyce's, the Alan Pardew's, we've had them all. But we want something that you enjoy watching on a Saturday. That might sound reductive and obvious, but you want to feel like you can enjoy watching your team. And even though the results haven't been there in terms of points on the board so far this season, I don't think we're playing bad football. So that to be the hope that we get, the likes of Walton and Eze back. We get a bit of momentum, and hopefully starting this weekend we pick up 3 points. But I'm not necessarily suggesting we will. I think it probably is going to be, a draw, maybe 1-1 or 2-2.
Yeah, I think, as I say, from a personal point of view, I hope Palace have a successful season, starting Saturday 5:30, not at 3 o'clock. But we'll see how that goes. I've got a lot of love for Palace, and I hope that it's one of those derbies for me that it's more about personal wanting to win than anything else. But I also love a trip to Selhurst Park. It might have the worst view in the world from your way end, but it's always worth a travel and getting and walking up Portland Road in order to go see the game. So anyway, Dan, thanks very much for joining us for this week. Everyone who is watching, please like and subscribe to the show, share it with your Fulham mates. We'll see you again on Monday with a review of the game from Saturday. Hopefully Drew will be able to join us for that, and we'll all be back together as a team. Come on, you Whites.
Cheers.